Today we really have, the topic is really a kind of planning that we generally don't think of as planning, but it is, and there is a kind of emerging tradition called cultural planning, which tries to really look at the city and the way the arts are integrated in the city, and we have the best possible person we could get to talk about this topic, Jen Seibert. Jen's been a leader for many years, nationally and locally, on all things related to arts and urban environment. She was one of the original authors of the Austin Arts in Public Places Ordinance and Guidelines, back in the 80s, I think that was.
Yeah, late 80s.
She worked on the Design Commission, helped write the Downtown Design Guidelines, was on the internal task force for the New York Airport. She's currently the arts coordinator for the City of Austin, Civic Arts Coordinator for the City of Austin. She's been doing that for about the past 5 years. She was one of the task force on the beginning to think about the way that artistic and cultural activity relates to economic outcomes and economic development processes. She's a graduate of UCLA with a degree in art design and studied in the master's program right here in the School of Architecture at the University of Texas. She's an Art Fellow in Community Building and studying a course in New Urbanism at the University of Miami School of Architecture recently. So it's really my pleasure to introduce Jen Seibert.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here. It's always fun to come back to UT and to talk about things that I love with people I know and learning about the urban environment and what can we do here. So it's a fun opportunity for me. So this is Create Austin. This is our community cultural planning process. Welcome to listening to what we're doing here. It's a very important project for the whole city. This isn't just about the city doing something, and this isn't just about the arts and culture and creative industries. And we'll kind of explore that as we go through this. So what is Create Austin? Create Austin is a community cultural planning process. We're here to identify, let me highlight some of these things. We're trying to identify Austin's creative assets, define goals, and establish recommendations to curate Austin's culture of creativity to the year 2017. And I'll come back to this creativity. This isn't just about trying to further develop the arts for the art's sake. This is about the big picture that we want a better city, we want it more livable, we want it culturally vital, we want people to be able to, when they hear Austin, when you're away from Austin, people want to come here, development, cultural vitality, a number of things. This is a public-private collaboration. We're really trying to be careful to say that because this isn't just about what the city can do. As one of my colleagues, our Leadership Council Chair, Cookie Ruiz, has said, if we just depend upon the city to pay for these things, our vision is much bigger than what the city can even handle. So we need other partners. And so that's part of what this is. This is a public-private partnership. We're trying to seek out those people that we know can implement some of the strategies we'll come up with so that we're working on this together. So it's community-wide implementation. And again, that going back to that culture of creativity, we want to make Austin a magnet for arts, culture, and creativity. And you all, I know, heard the talk of Richard Florida, cultural vitality, and this is part of what we're trying to do here is culture of creativity. Another word for it is kind of a creative milieu. We want our city to be a special place. You know, the creativity and creative people will go a long way to create the kind of city we want. Now I'm going to go into Create Austin a little bit. These are actually Michael's going to recognize these questions because when I said to him, when he asked me to do this, I said, okay, well, what do you want to know about? And these are the 3 questions that he posed to me, and I know it was kind of a stream of consciousness, but I'm kind of using these a little bit as a hanger to put some of my words on. So the 3 questions: why is support and development of art and cultural activities important to Austin? What are the main challenges to the city's cultural and artistic community? And then the 3rd one, how can we plan to support and improve Austin's cultural and artistic environment? So try to hold some of those questions. I'm going to answer them as we go through this. This is one of the key ones, and I even took his answers. Michael, you got the right 3. You know, it's fun to dialogue with other people to see what it is they're thinking. And if he had asked me those questions, or this particular question, these are answers I would have given. But let's kind of expand on that a little bit. Quality of life, clean local amenities. This goes back to that culture of creativity, or that creative milieu, that really, why should we support it? Because it contributes to our quality of life. It creates that creative milieu, that ambiance that is so characteristic of Austin. That keep Austin weird. We've got the music, we've got the different cultures, we've got the built environment, we've got those magical moments that happen in Austin. All these contribute to that kind of setting, so that if we create this wonderful setting, then we know that it's going to be a draw for people, whether they're residents or tourists, to come into Austin, because that it will resonate that this is a cool place to be. So that is one of the reasons why we want to continue developing the arts and culture, because it's the very foundation of what makes Austin unique, that keep Austin weird. Additionally, you know, here's the people. So there's the place, kind of that setting, and then there's our creative individuals. Now, a lot of these are, you see, Degollado. There's some public art, there's some different cultures, there's theater. All these pieces are part of that creative milieu. It's that person interacting with their environment that sparks those expressions that are uniquely Austin and uniquely personal, so that in that personal notation of expression, that builds layer upon layer of what Austin is about. And why are we doing this? I mean, certainly, yeah, we want more money, because if we build this, they will come. It is an economic development. You've seen it, for any of you who have been in Austin for a long time, you've seen the booming going on in the downtown area. We're actually the fastest growing municipality after Las Vegas. So we are just booming. When you see other places, I mean, we're even better than that. And tourists, I'm going to demonstrate or illustrate that tourists have really grown over the years, and that gives us, that's part of that economic development. But I think that we're doing this for the future. This is about the children, whether it's about trying to maintain that unique Austin or those unique mosaic of cultures, whether it's the Latino, Asian, African American, but it's also about building that creative workforce. So we've got the little girl on the left-hand side playing with blocks, but part of building or developing on the arts and culture is building that creative expression within each of us individually. And remember, you don't have to be an artist in order to be creative. That was one of the things that Richard Florida has really said, is that it's not just about the artist, but you can be creative in your job in anything that you do. And as we move towards more of a information community, then it's our brain power, it's our ability to think through problems or to think new ideas that is paramount in how we as a community or how we as individuals can be. So that's a major reason why we want to do this. So this is going to be one of the questions. I'm just kind of teasing you again. Remember this question, main challenges. And then I'm going to just talk about this a minute. How can we plan? Because I found it interesting how I think embedded in this question is the question, should we be planning? And I don't know if that was something you were thinking about, but I'm kind of a Christopher Alexander fan, and so I believe that things grow organically and that you take one step and then you take another step and then you take another step. And so you hear about children that never learned to crawl. They went from just sitting to walking, and that is a learning, they end up having a learning disability. So there is a real truth to this organic unfolding. So when I think about planning or when I think about what we can do, for me it's more about looking around what is happening naturally. What is happening naturally that I or someone could go over, and it's like starting a fire. You give it some air and a fire can start. So it's part of my kind of planning style is, yes, we need to have all the infrastructure and the armature so that we can have an idea of where we're going, but I think we always have to remain flexible to those surprises that happen, to the unique things that happen, and to try to encourage those things, because I think that is where we get our authenticity and our really, where we go straight to the soul. What is it that we are about? So I'm going to go over the cultural planning process a little bit with you, what we're doing. Goals, process, and prospects. Again, this was developed actually in our leadership council, and I'm going to talk about them in a minute, but this is a short speech. We're just beginning to get out there because we wanted things succinct to say what we were really doing, what was something concrete. So we are identifying creative assets and challenges. We're defining the goals. We're establishing those recommendations, and it's to integrate. So part of what we can do in planning, maybe we want to be careful about helping this out organically, but there can be a quickening that can happen. So things can move a little bit faster when you are planning and when you know what you're doing. Culture of creativity, public-private collaboration, strategies, magnet for arts, culture, and creativity. So what is cultural planning? Michael alluded to it a little bit. It's a process that takes stock of existing cultural resources and how they can be maintained, enhanced, or developed to continue to improve our lives and the vitality, livability, and success of our community. So we've actually been in this process. We first did a cultural assessment that took us about a year and a half, and I'm trying to think of when we started that. It was a couple of years ago. Actually, probably 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago, I wrote a grant to the NEA that gave us our first seed money to actually do the cultural assessment. We got $20,000 that year to do the cultural assessment, and then we turned around and wrote another grant just recently, or last year, a couple years ago, for the planning segment of it, and we got $40,000 for that. So what we've been doing with this, what we have done with the cultural assessment, and we're continuing to do this, work on this. We're trying to, first of all, it's arts and culture. It's what you think of as the traditional arts and culture, the organizations and individuals, the musicians. If any of you picked up the Austin Arts book, that book is primarily focused on our cultural funding program recipients. So these people we actually contract with to do their art services. But there are many, as you know, there are many artists and other creative people that don't even aren't on the radar screen of arts and culture. Certainly our musicians are, and our musicians, they oftentimes will live in those three worlds, that nonprofit, commercial, and community. And if any of you have Michael for a professor, I know he talks about Anne Markuson, and she's been, in the last 10 years or so she's been working on trying to understand the artist piece, the individual piece, in all the studying of cultural vitality and creative economy. So we're looking at arts and culture, for-profit, commercial, and community-based. I think that's real important to stress. This is kind of a new wave of cultural planning these days, is to embrace those three segments. It used to be that we would just talk about nonprofit, or we would just talk about for-profit. Now we're trying to look at it together, and are there things that we can see together that, or that all of them have, that we can help out. So I oftentimes talk about the cultural environment, and I oftentimes share a systems map that I use occasionally to talk about this, because when if you can understand it holistically, you can understand how each one of the disciplines has its own little ecosystem, the way it runs, the way people come up through the system, how they communicate with each other. As part of a city, I refer to cultural clusters a little bit, because there's the history, and it used to be that they talked about America being a melting pot, and now they're talking more about America being a mosaic of cultures. So trying to recognize that there are specific ways that groups of people live, and part of that is through the culture, heritage that they have grown up. And we talked about that cultural setting, and that's kind of the cultural habitat. We've been looking at public space and facilities. Funding system is a real critical one we're looking at, because whoever has the money, it's like whoever has the ball gets to name the game and set the rules and how you get to play. So whoever has the money, wherever that money comes from, has its own rules and its own kind of system and world that we live in. And we're going to talk about the funding here in Austin a little bit. And then we always have to drill down. You kind of look at the big picture and you drill down until you get to the individual, because that's where we can really make an impact. This is something that we're working on right now. This is actually, I wanted to do this slide because it tells a few different stories. This is actually kind of the development of the cultural funding programs, which is what the city uses. It's like a grant program, but we don't call them grants. We call them contracts for services, because they give us a final report that they've completed their proposal as they had stated. So there's a few different stories in here. One of the stories is about the Arts Commission. It was in '69 that the Arts Council, there was an independent Arts Council, a loose group of people that came together, and they incorporated as a nonprofit. And they received some funding and administrative support from the city. And their main purpose was to take care of the few arts organizations that were going on, or that were alive at that time. And there was a handful. And it was in '71 that the city council actually said, okay, we see over here with the state that there's a law for a hotel occupancy tax, and it was set up in part to fund the arts. So we're going to say, we're going to use a percentage of the hotel occupancy tax, and that's when you take, the tourists will come in and there's a hotel room they pay for, and there's a percentage, an extra tax that's put on them, that's the hotel occupancy tax. A small portion of it, meaning the arts. Most of it goes to the convention center for their work and to pay down debt, but we get a small percentage of it. So it was in '71 that it was first adopted by the City Council. Now, we see the Austin Arts Commission. Now we've got a formal establishment by the City Council to have an Austin Arts Commission. And this Arts Council actually dissolved, and now we have a commission. And we got administrative support from the City Parks and Rec Department. On this was to give out, to tell again, to contract for services to the arts organizations. 7 contractors, $50,000 that they were 7. One of the stories is that we had $150,000 from that. Today, or what we're anticipating in '07, is that we're going to have dollars that we want to have. Quite a piece. And there's only 97 and 2,000 things I want to point out first we've got over the time. So that's, the tourist industry has been kind of looking at it. How many started funding 225 kind of a, because sometimes there's a grant programs or a contract level number. Yeah.
But these do they all have to have sufficient work?
We have changed the years, and so right now, operational support and project support, and they do have to set up. We're now money for operational as opposed to project support. We're easy for people to money for an individual project. It's for a large organization to have just the ongoing of it. So operating C3 nonprofit individual with. They are supposed to have in both these projects, both these kinds of programs, certain museums and theaters as their public component. But an individual artist that wants to get money from us has to have a public component, whether it is a performance that is out in the public, whether it's in schools. There is a public component to it. There's another story I wanted to point out here, and Michael probably can see it. You can see our money has, now we've got $4 billion, but is that number going to plateau? Can we growing? The other question, can we continue growing arts organizations? There are certainly people that are of the major institutions that said you shouldn't be funding these little organizations. They should just work as best they can. And besides, we're the ones that supply that arts and culture activity for the city. So at some point in time, this isn't sustainable. This system isn't sustainable, and we're hearing about this more and more because with 9/11, with the things that they've changed, there have always been 3 revenue streams. There's been foundations, corporations, and individuals. And after 9/11, all 3 of those, it used to be if there was a crisis in one, the other 2 could fill out the time period until the other one got on its feet. But all 3 of them are really are having a lot of problems. So we've got to take a look at this. There's an ad piece on Austin. We don't have a real strong philanthropic community. I think it's been in the last 5 years that I've all of a sudden seen individuals' names be more, I see them in the newspaper more, giving big hunks of money, like Joe and Teresa Long for the Long Performing Arts Center, or some of the supporters for the Blanton, or some of the supporters for the Austin Museum of Art. But we really have, I've had a lot of talks with Cliff Redd, who is the executive director of the Long Performing Arts Center, and he's convinced that there's money out there. He knows that it's there. Part of it is that some of these people they don't have that wherewithal, they don't have that philanthropic mentality to be able to give money. So we have to teach them about that. That's one of the things that we have to teach them about giving us your money. That's right. But I'm here educating them. But that's to take a look at the philanthropic community here in Austin and figure out how to invigorate it. I think that's going to be very helpful.
Janet, do you think that's somewhat symptomatic of Austin being a young town and a lot of people moving to Austin versus maybe Houston or Dallas, where you've got very well-to-do families that are long established in those communities, and that's sort of the price you pay for being in that part of the community is it's expected that you make those contributions, where a fair amount of the wealth that, to some degree in Austin, is high-tech and sort of new money?
I think you're absolutely right, and there's something else going on there, too, because this is a young community. I remember taking a consultant to talk to Mayor Wynn a couple of years ago, and I was shocked when he told us that the median age of an Austinite is 27, and every 5 years it gets younger. And I said that to my department director, and just recently she said, oh, well, it's finally stabilized a little bit. But we have these young people, very young people, and they've come to Austin, they're settling here, and they're not, a lot of them aren't in that mode of giving. Or if they are, it's because they have children and they're giving money to their schools or to social service kind of things rather than the arts. Usually the philanthropist that gives to the arts is usually someone older. That's what it has been traditionally. And yeah, absolutely. And some of the organizations are actually, they recognize this, and so they're developing some new things. I know Symphony, the LBJ Library, all three of those have a young membership group that they do that too. They got to get to these young people, and so it creates around that age group, and so they can develop that philanthropic mentality as they get older. And I think also is what my department director was referring to when she said that we finally stabilized our youth, is that people have come to UT to go to school, and they've fallen in love with the city, and they stay here and have families. So I think eventually it might stabilize. It is for young people. There's a lot going on, a lot of things that in the evening, different couples to partake of. There's some others, so that's an economic development strategy, using the hotel occupancy. So we've actually grown, just in what the city has done with the cultural funding program, we've actually grown that cultural milieu with that hotel occupancy tax. There's other ways that the city has invested in the arts, and I think that that's a new kind of thinking also, invest in these. There's kind of this right hand, left hand. There's economic development for the arts, but let's not forget the value that the arts have inherently, whether it's to get to the soul of who we are as a people, or just different things that are important, that just art for art's sake. We have a creative industries loan program now that can be for all the arts. We have actually, in a couple of slides, I think I have something that says something about that. I'll tell you about it in a minute, but let me just go over these real quickly. Public-private partnerships. We have a partnership with the Austin Film Society, with Austin Film Studios, and that sort of thing is going on. We have a partnership with Zach Scott. We actually have a partnership with Mesh Arte. They're going to be building their new building, the Mexican American Cultural Center. And then we also have special initiatives and programs. This is a slide, one of my colleagues who works on maps kind of recognize that there are a lot of cultural facilities in this area right here. So there's the Long Center, no, that's the Long Center. There's a MOA there. There's the Austin Lyric Opera. Here's a picture of the Mexican American Cultural Center. And part of why I wanted to bring these is just that we just passed a $35 million bond package for the arts. So that's going towards not renovating, but upgrading one of the Austin film studios. It's going towards Meche Arte building over at the MAC. Not money for the Long Center, but there are, MOA is not getting any money. But there are a lot of cultural facilities that the city is building right now that with the bond package. The City of Austin, the Art and Public Places program, they were the first program to be, or first public art program in the state to be established. And they have over 157 public artworks in over 100 city facilities worth $3.8 million. Now, this was an investment, or is an investment in that setting. You know, how can we create that setting for those cultural activities to happen? So this is one way that we're doing it. And let me say that this has, since they have been under the wing of this new department, economic growth, they have really grown by leaps and bounds. They've been working with private developers now. We don't have a mandatory percent for our program for private developers, but they're beginning to do public art. You can see that at Whole Foods Market. They're also just beginning to work with Capital Metro, so I'm hopeful that we'll actually get some unique stations with light rail and some of the other bus stations. Here's where I can talk about the Creative Loan Program. Actually, it's a guarantee program. You have to, it started with the music, with the commercial music. You've got to be accepted by the bank. You've got to be a good credit risk. So it doesn't help with that. But what it does help with is that if for some reason you falter with your loan, then the city will guarantee the lending company that they will get their money to them. So, and it used to be just for the music. I know Toby Futrell, our city manager, she really thinks in boxes sometimes, that she sees the hotel occupancy tax is taking care of the nonprofit arts, so she tries to look for other kind of mechanisms to help some of the other kinds of arts. And so the Creative Industries Loan Program was created specifically for music. It's now been extended to include film, and it also includes any arts, so the nonprofit arts can tap into that now. And we do have a limit. I think we have a limit of $650,000 that we kind of hold as the guarantee. There are other things that are going on. You might know about the Music Network. That has changed hands a little bit. The music community has been very proactive here in Austin, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The film and visual media was also has been very active. They also commissioned an economic impact study that came with a set of recommendations, and we've been implementing those. Many of these we're not giving money to someone, but we're trying to make it easier to do their work, whether it's streamlining processes so that film companies that come in here can get to the streets to do their work more quickly. And I don't know if you've seen the headlines about Friday Night Lights, but the city has been in negotiation with the TV station to make sure that we try to keep that Friday Night Lights here in Austin, and I'm sure what they do. Here's some special initiatives. We have 3 programs at the City Hall. I think of these as economic development strategies also. We have a Friday noontime concert that goes on part of the year. It was going on when I left. We have the People's Gallery. Many of you have heard we've got a changing exhibit program at the at City Hall is up for a year, and we have a call for artists, and then we do a set of visual art. And so we talk about this being the largest gallery in town, and I'm always amazed. I have here, and so many people are coming in just to see the art. And the building itself is a work of art, Antoine Privas. Faces of Boston is a program I started. There are some video screens in the lobby, and the purpose of the video screens was to showcase or not to showcase, but to show city council meetings live, so that you didn't have to sit in the meeting, you could actually watch the city council meeting in the lobby. And I saw, well, geez, we only have a city council meeting once a week, so there's kind of that default time. How can we use that? And I've had a few calls for artists, and we're showcasing Austin, Central Texas filmmakers on the video screens. You can actually access them by yourself. I wanted to show this one because we do have some history on some of the collective development. And I think that this is critical in understanding how we're going to do this planning. Or, you know, you're never doing something in a vacuum. There's always a context, whether it's a historical context, there's a spatial context. And for me, this really tells a story about what has been going on with Austin as far as cultural policy. So we have that Arts Council incorporated in '69. The first time they actually said, let's take a look at the arts in Austin, was in '85. And it was kind of an opinion research, well, the company was Opinion Research Associates. It was a study, and not real extensive, not the kind of co-planning we do today. There was some community outreach. And partly as a result was that the Austin Arts Commission was established through ordinance, and that makes it law. Ordinance makes it law. Austin Art and Public Places program at 6. You can see that there was this activity in the late 80s, that we kind of came into a particular level of maturation. And so there was the Opinion Research Associates study, and Public Places started, the Austin Music Commission. There aren't a lot of cities that have separate commissions like this, but we have this Austin Music Commission, and it really performs independently from the Arts Commission. And I think there should be that question out there: what in our new evolving thing that we're doing with this plan, how are we going to run that Music Commission and Arts Commission? Are we going to continue to do it separately? The first time we had a real serious planning process for cultural planning was completed in '93. It actually got started in '91. The Comprehensive Arts Plan. And for people who were on that plan, they say, well, you know, we really didn't get a lot of concrete steps to do out of it, but what we did do was a huge sea change. What we did do was that all these organizations were fighting. I mean, the cultural funding program is wonderful, but it sets up this competition, and that's not a way to be collaborative or work towards a common. And things had broken down so badly that there was a lot of fighting going on between particular arts organizations. And this was an opportunity to come together. And so major thing that came out of it is that people came to the table. All these different people came to the table and talked. And then in '02 and '03, there was another major thing that happened, that these happened concurrently. One didn't happen and the other didn't happen, but the two major things, we ended up having a crisis in our cultural funding program, in that it had devolved so much that council would change. The arts organizations could go prior to their individual council member and say, I didn't get the money I needed, and so the council would start fiddling with the dollars instead of taking the recommendations from a peer panel review process. So there was a city auditor report, and we actually had consultants that came on board to review the recommendations. So that's one thing that happened. Concurrently, that came out, and a couple of our city council people read it and saw Austin in it a lot, and said, well, okay, it's time that these two city council people wanted the city to take on economic development. We had really not done that very well. People have done it off and on, but we wanted a plan for economic development. So City Council created this Economic Development Task Force. There were 3 committees. One was traditional economic development, and that was about incentives and big businesses and how do we draw those big businesses here to Austin. The second one was about small business. We recognize that Austin is very idle and that there are a lot of homegrown businesses that are here. How can we help support them? And then the third one was the Retorta Committee. It was cultural, we were called Cultural Vitality and Creative Economy. Some people wanted us to say, keep Austin weird. We're the Keep Austin Weird Committee. But we wanted something that more clarified what we were about. So cultural vitality and creative economy. Both these activities, planning activities, came up with recommendations. And as a result, the City Council took some of the programs out of where they had been, and that was specifically the Cultural Funding Program and the Art and the Place Program, and they said, okay, we're going to take you two and we're going to put you over here in economic growth and redevelopment services. I was already over there doing some arts and development, kind of an Uber department. I don't want to get into it in great depth, but it was kind of a different department. And so I was there, and then we brought the person that was over in an odd place, telecommunications, the Creative Industries Loan Program that was doing commercial music and film. So we brought a group of people together at Economic Growth to kind of incubate a new kind of thinking about the arts and creative industries. And so what we're doing today with this cultural planning is actually a direct result of this happening. Let me see if I can get some, hurry up here. Oh, I wanted to answer some. Cultural assessment to date. We've had all sorts of things. Let's just say lots of studies, online surveys, inventories, lots of things going on. Okay, now we actually now have a consultant on board. About a year ago, we had a request for proposals, and by August, we had hired a group out of Portland, Oregon, Metropolitan Group, and Bill Buick with creative planning. And they've been on board with us since they've looked at review of past plans, research another background. One of the things we've done is we've created a leadership council. We have a membership group of about 70 people, high-level leaders across the arts, across business, tourism. Pat Jones, the superintendent at AISD, Michael Rollins, the head of the Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce, is on it. We have Michael is on it. We have people that are helping us through this process. We're doing strategic communications to leverage education. We've got interviews going on, focus groups, community meetings. We've already completed a summary findings document, and we're into talent. So this is some pictures of what's going on. We're working on a timeline. That those 2 slides that I showed, some timeline, is something that we're going to work on. Here's, we had a flyer. We had some community meetings in January. 4 community meetings that we had strategically placed around the city, and we got really good participation and include as many people as possible. We have an e-newsletter, and here's our 2 websites. I have it on the slide, but please sign up for our e-newsletter. www.cityofaustin.org/plan, and you can sign up for our newsletter. We always have a research corner in the newsletter. We've got the arts and the RAND report. I don't know how many of you know about this. It's an extraordinary report. I asked Michael's opinion on one of the Ann Markison's studies, and we've got crossovers. We suggested people read crossover. So we had the community meetings, we had an arts and culture roundtable, we had about 80 people that came there were just arts and culture people, and our leadership council, they're busy at work there on the bottom. Okay, I'm going to try to go through some of this quickly. These are collective values. Things that we can think of that we want to cover, what we're doing. We want to think about being inclusive, being collaborative, and being innovative. I'm not going to go over these. This is a set of, I think there's 3 slides here. This is our vision, what we hope to see in 2017. There's a variety of things. Supporting the individual creators, making sure we're financially stable, and a whole set of things. So I threw up this slide, going back to one of Michael's questions. What are the main challenges? He proposed that these are the ones. Cost of living, economic opportunity. I changed your I forgot what you said, but I'm calling it underdeveloped philanthropic support, because I think that's part of what it is. And then there has been some history. I shared with you a little history of division over the arts should be supported. And that, how can we plan to support? So, holding those in your mind, the summary of findings, our consultant had so many interviews, working with our leadership council, community meetings, it just goes on, and he set up a summary of findings heading that tried to get to what's going on in Austin. What's the leadership issues? What are the strengths? It's kind of SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. What are the challenges, again, and then what are the goals and opportunities for cultural planning? And then the Leadership Council, through this meeting, our consultant took that summary of findings, and he worked with the Leadership Council to try to identify those theme areas that we should have forces built around. This is where we're going to get to those recommendations that will eventually turn into the strategies for the plan. These are structures that were used when these topics were chosen for the task forces. Importance of themes, whether or not these things are doable, practical, doable strategies. We don't want to create a pie-in-the-sky strategy and not be able to implement it. We want something that can work. Our overarching values, there are those 3 values. And then what are those, but there are some cross-cutting issues, themes, and outcomes that cross over all the task forces. Leadership, community, identity, authenticity, quality of life. These are the 6 task forces that we came up with. Let me go through them real quickly. Built environment, facilities, studio space, public art and design, cultural districts. In the task force, they're going to talk about these things. Michael?
In the built environment part, I know this came up a little bit, but the whole issue of kind of historic preservation and the preservation of iconic places, that's tough, particularly iconic places.
Yeah.
Is that going to be...
I think that's going to be important. Yeah, I think that's going to be part of the focus. Did you see the article in the Austin Chronicle? Andreas Duani was here a couple of weeks ago, and someone sat down with him and asked him, well, what's wrong with Austin? And he just let it get out. Anyway,
he doesn't hold back. I was there when Will came to speak.
Oh, I was.
And he didn't let Will get out of the room before he was dissing Austin. I thought it was really rude, actually.
And I know him. It is surprising. Let's try to get through this quickly. Financial resources. We talk about the underdeveloped philanthropic community. But we also have to take a look at the corporate and individual support. And then those public support mechanisms. I showed you what the sustainability. How are we going to sustain this and grow it? How are we going to do this? There's only so much you can do and so much money available. Communications and collaborative ventures. We've been hearing from a lot of people that we need better marketing. That's why we did the Austin Arts Book, is to help get the arts better. There's that community identity. But with this, there's also that, I guess it was at the Arts and Culture Roundtable. We heard so many times, this is so fast, we are getting together and talking about this. So people want opportunity to come together to talk. Support individual creative. Remember I told you, you start with the big picture and it all comes down to the individual. What can we do to help them out? Professional development, networking and connectivity, workforce development. Ann Markison talks about this cross those three, nonprofit, for-profit, and community, actually put together, they cobble together different projects to make a living. They're entrepreneur life. Housing. One of the reasons why we do so many arts is at one time it was affordable to live here anymore. And I know that's not just hitting arts, but it's hitting healthcare and insurance is critical. Healthcare, the Music Foundation has developed a program for healthcare for the musicians. Creativity and learning. We know, the studies have proven that if students have art in elementary school through school, they're more apt to be a supporter as an adult. So that's part of the approach. The other part is that if you're not learning, if you're not doing new things or trying to learn, then you're just stagnant. And so we want to, again, it goes back to more livable and being a better place. That's part of what learning is. Infrastructure. So this is not like built environment infrastructure. Built environment has to do with environment and buildings and setting and all. This has to do with what are those things to support activities for how the public-private relationship, city policies, cultural institutions, integration with other planning efforts, development of networking, plantation. So there's the 6 again. I wish we had more time, but right now we've got a survey with our leadership council to say, do we have it? Are we missing anything? Because right now these are just draft form. So doing next steps, we're continuing that ability. Please sign up for our e-newsletter. We've got, you can add continue doing inventory and research. We are now in actually a little bit pre. What we're doing is we're trying to identify what those 6 task forces will talk about, and we're going to launch meetings in May probably. This is what the plan is going to entail. Community vision, cultural assessment, policy framework, implementation. Let me stay here for a minute. Short, medium, and long-term timeline, strategy, action steps. Who's the lead responsible entity that can help us with that implementation? Resources needed. So once we have a plan, we're going to vet that plan through public community meetings, leadership council review, and corrections, city council adoption, and implementation. We expect to have this, our city council adoption, probably by, I want to say, winter of this year. So it actually takes. Thank you. Here's the fact to say that we have a second website. It's actually not, I shouldn't even have it up here on the screen. The Create Austin was created by our consultant, and it's a place to blog, add photos, do a lot of things, have a conversation. We're on the website.